Hey YouTube, 6-Speed Dakota here with another garage episode. Now today's tip is how to prolong your ball joints, your suspension, your joints in the suspension, that kind of thing. Now most vehicles do not have greasable suspension linkages. At one point Mercedes took over Daimler Chrysler, and my 06 Dakota is a pretty obvious feature of that because it doesn't have any greasable fittings whatsoever. And you could just tell some of the things, it just had a bit of a European twist to it. You know, a lot of European vehicles, they pretty much never used greasable suspension fittings. And Ford, Chevy, Dodge are doing it. My dad's Tahoe hybrid has no greasable suspension fittings. So what people sometimes do is they take a grease fitting, like an actual fitting, just like this guy right here, and they drill and tap a hole in like the tie rod, in the bottom of the tie rod. So if we look under here, or in the ball joint here, they drill and tap a hole in there. Don't do this. This weakens the suspension joint. If it's been cast with that hole and they're designed to be tapped out, then that's fine. I'm a mechanical engineering student and I know exactly all about this stuff. If you mess with the design, you're going to end up with problems. The mechanical engineers, we get paid a lot of money to figure this stuff out. So don't try to improve on the design. You're probably just going to hinder it. So there's another trick to get grease inside those fittings. And it works on anything. I do it on my Dakota all the time. And it's actually very simple. You need one of these guys. This is a little, basically a needle, about like a 16 or 14 gauge needle. It's in a little bit of a sheath, but it's got a little grease fitting on the end of it. And what this guy does is it attaches to your grease gun, and you stick it in the boot of your suspension component. So, you can see I got my 350 Wolverine here. You see that little boot right there. Actually, it feels like there's water in it, which is very bad. Once that grease dries up, water invades in there, and it basically rusts it out and wears it out. So the suspension's still quite tight if I try to rock the wheel, so that's good. And you have two tie rods, this guy down here, you got one up there for both sides, and an upper and lower ball joint. And in this case we don't have a CV joint going to the middle here because this is only two-wheel drive. But same principle for that. So what we want to do is we're going to take the needle out of its little sheath. It's a little bit bent because I've beaten on it just a little bit. See the kind of the chisel cut edge on it. So we're going to take our handy dandy Canadian Tire grease gun. I'm going to stick that guy right in there, just like that. And it goes like there we go. Now this is going to want to leak out of here if you just all of a sudden just jam it. So you gotta grease fairly slowly. So what we want to do is you're just going to insert that in there. You're just going to kind of want to go to the side of it a little bit, just so it's sitting like that. And we're just going to take it, and we're going to just pump it ever so slowly. This process takes a little while. You'll see if you pump it slowly that it won't just come shooting out of there. Some grease is going to come out of there, but not as much. And I usually like to give it 2 shots on every suspension component. There it starts to go. So by doing this, this really prolongs the life of it. And greasing things is how you keep them going. My dad, we had a 97 Suburban before he bought his Tahoe hybrid, and older GM ball joints are notorious for going. And this thing lasted over 200,000 K, so 120,000 miles plus, and they were still perfectly fine. The only problem I had was the idler and pitman arm. And just by greasing them frequently, that's all that we did. So keep this in mind when you take your wheels off next. If you got an import or a vehicle that doesn't have serviceable suspension components, you want to save yourself. It cost me $1,200 to do it in my S10. I had a 93 Chevy before I bought the Dodge, and I had a suspension bushing, or not a bushing, a ball joint fail on the road, and the suspension fell apart. So basically, that ended up being a very costly repair bill. It cost me almost $1,200 to get it replaced. And then I had to do the brakes, which were bad. They told me that they were seized. So that just ended up getting worse, and it just basically ended up digging a hole in my pocket, essentially. So regular greasing, regular service will keep these things alive for a long period of time. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. We got more to come.